Hi, I'm Tom and I talk about code. Recently I hit an important milestone in my career, 3 years of full-time developer work. Today, in this video, I want to walk the clock back to November 2018. I want to talk about the different roles that I've worked in, the experience that I've gained along the way. I want to talk about some of the challenges that I've faced. Most of my career so far has happened during a global pandemic. But more general, I guess, things that probably everyone's going to experience at some point in their career. I'm hoping that someone watching this will either, just kind of enjoy the ride, or maybe if you're looking to get into a job as a programmer, or if you've just started a job as a programmer, kind of your first job, you might be able to learn something from this video. And I also want to take some time to reflect and talk about where I see myself in another 3 years. In November 2018, I was still studying at uni, I was getting ready to come into my last year, and in the summer break I got my first internship, a Java developer role with the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It was a really cool role, it was a really awesome team, we were spread all over Australia, so there was a lot of video calling, a lot of remote work. Even though I was physically in the office with a few people, it was a remote first team. But yeah, great office environment, great people. We used to go out for noodles on Thursday, and I really liked the people that I worked with, and I really enjoyed the work that we got to do. It was kind of front-end Java, so we were doing web portlets in 2018, which was kind of unexpected, kind of bizarre, but when you go into a dev job, you just do kind of have to be prepared for anything. I have a friend who's just started a role, and he's working with a 1980s basic code base, and they're trying to bring it into the .NET ecosystem. So wherever you go in the world, there will always be some bizarre piece of tech you have to interact with, either directly on your team or somewhere in your organization. There will probably be something weird that you have to deal with. But despite the tech stack not being particularly cross-applicable, it was fun work, it was a good introduction. We were a very testing-focused team. Our tech lead tried to really push test-driven development, which was a real shock to my system because I'd never written a well-tested line of code in my life. But after a few months on this team, disaster struck, there was a bit of reorganization, and our project was basically dropped, never to see the light of day, or it was an internal project, so never to see the light of the fluorescent lights in the office. All of the work I did for the first few months of my career just was wiped off the table. It was gone. Never to be seen again. And so that was a bit disheartening. And so I learned an important lesson that day, that you can't be too attached to the stuff you do in your job. Sometimes things outside of your power will happen. If you have a hobby project, if you have a toy project, you can hack away at that over months, over years, and you are the sole thing responsible for its progress. But in a big organization, in a job, sometimes, your organization might restructure something, your project may not work, it may be so far under budget and so far behind, there may just be a reshuffle, someone may just decide it's not what they want to do. Sometimes your work does just go away. And having a certain level of professional detachment is important, and I think I was lucky so early in my career to have a bit of a slap in the face to say, hey, don't get too attached. Following that, I was moved into a team that was just spinning up to do extensions to our identity and access management provider. So I was, again, doing Java. It was a weird team, it was an interesting team. Identity and access management is not something I had any experience with, it wasn't something anyone on the team really had any experience with, so we were learning as we went, we were building expertise, we were understanding a bunch of different parts of our tech stack. I got to do a lot of probing around Active Directory, so a lot of command line, just logging into remote servers and hitting various things and restarting things, and so it was good for my kind of Linux foo, it was good for my command line experience, it was good for my experience of, server administration style activities, I guess. Unfortunately, at points it did devolve into kind of data entry where we had users we needed to get into the system. Our bulk loader tool wasn't working properly, or we kind of had to pre-massage the data to get it into a bulk loader format, so I kind of did a bit of spreadsheet filling in, which was disappointing. But on the whole, again, a weird role with a weird technology stack that I'm not really sure how it would apply to other things, but really exciting to be part of a team as it spun up, part of a team that, got to all learn kind of at the same rate, kind of at the same time. None of us knew what we were doing at the start, and we got to learn together, and even as quite a junior dev, I got to have a lot of influence in the things we were doing in that team and the way things got done. Coming into the start of 2020 with a pandemic looming, I started a grad position with my current organization. And we had a really amazing first week. People all came together, we met all the other grads, we had, onboarding activities, we got to do a tour of our data center, which was really cool. And then I started with my team as a Java backend developer. And Java backend dev really clicked for me. I think I made a great first impression. I hit the ground running, I had some really good early wins, and then I think 4 weeks in, or 3 weeks in even, we all went work from home because COVID hit Melbourne. So work from home's hard. Working from home when you don't really know the people you're working with is really, really hard. I also had another disappointment, where work I'd been working on was suddenly deprioritized. The pandemic hit, all of our priorities got reshuffled, things were on fire, it was a bit of a mad panic, and yeah, I had to let go of work that I was feeling quite proud of and that I thought I'd done really well with. I was making this great first impression, and then I had to let something go. But over the next few months, things would start to return to normal a bit more. I would never get to pick that piece of work up again. As far as I know, that is still a very, very stale branch somewhere in someone's repository. Maybe they'll pick it up one day, I don't know. But I would get to do some cool stuff. I'd get to experiment a bit with Golang. I just had some time to do some personal learning and growth with that. I would deliver a few features, and to this day, in our app, I can see code that I wrote actually doing things, which is really exciting. Or not see it directly, but the front end, I can see I know where the front end talks to the back end bit that I wrote. In my grad program, I had the opportunity to do different things every 6 months for 18 months. And for my second rotation, I decided to try being an architect. I knew that I could write code at this point. I'm a very confident coder. I was feeling very good about my ability to just smash out features and all that. So I tried my hand at architecture. And architecture was a challenge. I found right at the start that I was just missing writing code, and so I kind of looked for excuses to write code, which some of the other architects thought was great. I was able to hack out, kind of prototype things for them. I was able to put together a visualization that a senior architect used in presenting to some of the top brass in my organization. I think the CEO got to see it. And I actually won an MVP award and was given a delivery of cookies for my efforts, which was, a really good bit of recognition. But on the whole, the architecture didn't go well. When I was writing code, I wasn't really learning architecture concepts. And when I was doing architecture, I found it hard to actually deliver things. At the end of the day, I had a fairly large lump of work on my plate that I was trying to get done before the end of my rotation, and ultimately I left it unfinished. When I look back at it, I didn't ask the right questions up front to really define what a complete piece of work would look like. And that meant that when certain problems came up at the end, at the 11th hour, I wasn't able to fully understand them all. And so my piece of work was ultimately left unfinished. I was left with another disappointment, which again, at this point in lockdown, I've had really great experiences in my career, but there have been big disappointments towards the end of every role I've been in, pretty much, except for the back-end Java dev. So I'm feeling kind of sad, right, coming out of architecture. And then at the end of my architecture rotation in early 2021, I actually ended up spending a week in hospital. I was quite unwell. So things were looking pretty bad. There was like a grey rain cloud hanging over my head. I would go on to start in my next role in cloud engineering, but with some health issues still, I had to take a bunch of time off work. When I came back, things had been reshuffled, and I was on a team with 2 contractors. So we had 2 contractors and a grad. And the work that we were doing involved integrating all these different parts of the organization. There was a lot of talking to different people. There was a lot of knowledge of the organization required. And with 2 contractors and a grad, the work was kind of slow and kind of miserable. At the end of the day, I wasn't the right person to be on that team. I didn't bring a lot of value to that team. I didn't have cloud engineering expertise, and I didn't have the knowledge of the organization that they really needed. And I actually went to my line manager and I put my hand up and I said, I'm not enjoying this role. I don't think I'm contributing much to this role. Is there something else I can do? So that was a scary thing to do. Thankfully, I had an awesome manager. He suspected that the role wasn't really working for me already before I even said anything. And he had something in mind for me to jump across to. If I hadn't have said it to him, he probably would have said it to me. But I was glad that I'd taken the initiative and done it. And yeah, really kind of put myself out there, right? I hadn't been in the role for very long when I reached out, but also in the grad program, I only had 6 months in this, area in total. So if I wanted to get the most out of it and be in a good team, I really did have to raise my hand sooner rather than later. So I moved into an area that I would never pick to go into. I became a cloud SRE. And SRE, I can't stand the thought of having a pager all the time that might go off. Thankfully, it was very foundational SRE. We were more defining service level objectives. We were defining how the alerting would work. There weren't any alerts that could go to a pager. So as far as I was concerned, it was the perfect window of time to be in SRE. And it was also really interesting to be on kind of the other side of the coin, right? From developer to operations. For one example, I had to develop my ability to look through logs, right? To go into Google logs to find what we're using, to use the filters. None of this was hard, but I was really glad to have the experience with it, and I've definitely used that experience since. So yeah, definitely glad for the opportunity. Even though I don't want to be an SRE, and even though I wouldn't have put my hand up for that opportunity normally, even though it came out of a bad circumstance, I kind of showed up with a can-do attitude. I got some stuff done, I made some good friends, and I ended up having a really, really good time in that role. And then we come to the midway point of 2021. I finally have to roll out of the grad program and into a normal permanent role. And I was looking at a few different things. I was thinking of going into data, potentially trying out data, because that's something I hadn't done, and I thought it would be good to broaden my CV, but I really thought about my experiences over the 2.5 years. I thought about the times that I'd been sad at work, the times that I hadn't really felt like I was able to do my best work. I thought about my architecture rotation, where really I just wanted to be writing code and writing features, and the style of working as an architect really just wasn't a good fit for me. I had a chance meeting with someone who just was telling me about this back-end Go work that they were doing, and it sounded really interesting to me. And then while I was investigating these roles, I noticed that someone I'd worked with as a tech lead earlier in my career was now in a more senior position. So I reached out to him in this area. I said, hey, do you want me to come and be a back-end Go dev? And we went through the process, and I got a slot in one of his teams. And now I'm working, as a back-end Go dev. I'd never worked in Golang before. I'd fiddled with it a little bit. I'd dabbled. I was familiar with the concepts. I was familiar with the idea of a Go routine, but I've done a lot of learning on the fly. The Golang approach to testing, especially with like test matrices, was a bit different, right? It was a bit hard to read at first, and there was a bit of a learning curve, but I'm loving Golang backend work. My current team's really great as well. I'm in an area with a lot of engineers, and the people on my team do a lot of work to shoulder a lot of stuff going on so that I'm able to really focus in on coding work. I feel like I'm being enabled to do my best work. It hasn't all been sunshine and roses. Unfortunately, I do think that doing so much work remotely, at this point I'm still not back in the office yet, and we won't be until February next year. I do think that's taken a toll on my productivity. I've worked on 5 different teams in lockdown, and every time I've changed team, it's felt harder and harder. It's another set of new faces of people that I don't know, and that I feel like I won't get to know until I can actually get into a room with them in person. I'm really excited that I will get to meet these people, but I just feel like my brain has gradually been drained every single change. I feel like with this current team, I haven't learnt things as quickly as I usually would. I haven't, internalized things about the code base that I would expect to be coming fairly naturally from how my other teams had gone by now. I am drained and I am tired. So my hope is that I'm going to take a good Christmas break. I'm going to relax. I'm going to come back refreshed. I'm going to meet everyone in the office. It's going to be an exciting time. It's going to kind of be a bit of a party, I guess, for a few weeks where we all reacquaint ourselves with actually interacting with other people. There will be after-work drinks. There will be, lunches, all that good stuff that we've been looking forward to. Before I start talking about the future, I do want to call out 2 things in particular that I found really confronting when I first started working as a dev. First, technical communication is actually really hard. I've been a bedroom programmer for most of my life, age 8, age 9, making little game maker games and starting to experiment with Python. But until I got my first full-time job, I'd never collaborated with anyone else. I guess I had done uni group assignments, but I always seemed to be the guy that just did all the work in those anyway. So in the workplace, you're constantly communicating about things. You're talking about how your branch is going. You're talking about an issue that you have. You find a problem with a dependency that's within your organization or that's outside your organization. You have to talk to someone about it. There's a lot of places where knowing how to give technical details is really important. Something that I struggle with is knowing how much technical detail to give. If you give too much technical detail in a conversation, you're going to bog the conversation down. Things are going to get confused. People are going to get sidetracked. I'm definitely guilty of giving too much technical detail in a lot of my communications, even to this day. But if you give too few technical details, you're just not going to be able to drill down and actually, get to the root of the thing you're trying to discuss. It's a constant balancing act. And I don't think anyone's ever, perfectly nailed this. I think it's something you always have to learn about and improve out as you go. And like anything, it's a skill. So if you're starting out in a programming job, or if you're hoping to start out in a programming job and you feel like this is a weakness, I recommend you try and find people either at uni or out and about, wherever you go. walking down the street, hello, do you know Python? Find people to talk to about programming. Talk about things you like. Talk about projects you're working on. Because like any skill, unless you practice this, it's not going to get better. And I'm going to take a quick moment here to plug my Discord. I've got a Discord. No one's in it yet except for me, but come in, say hi, tell me about coding projects you're working on. Come and hang out in voice channels and talk about cool stuff you're working on. I really want my Discord to be a place where people can share and learn and grow and hopefully, practice communicating about tech stuff, right? Among other things. I want it to be a cool, welcoming environment. So it will be a bit awkward because as of recording this, it's just me in there so far, but that's all linked in the description. The second thing I found challenging was that estimation is really, really hard. This is kind of like a meme, right? Software projects run over budget, software projects run over time for a whole variety of reasons. But I found it really hard on an individual level that my estimates were just so wrong. I would look at a piece of work, I would say, that'll take me 1 or 2 days. That'll be fine. And it wouldn't. It never does. So let me give you some examples of ways things can take longer than you expected. Maybe you smash out the first pass of the code in a day. Great. But then you put it in for review. And maybe someone doesn't even get to the review until the next day, right? So, there's just time where your wheels are spinning, where you may be working on something else, and you get the review back, and it might take you a day or two to action the feedback from that review. It might be a really detailed review. There might be something you'd really overlooked that you hadn't considered. It might be hard to pivot your approach to actually do something else. Another way that I've found things take longer is testing. I'm getting better now at writing testable code and at realizing what testable code will look like, at having a bit of an intuition for how hard something will be to test. Testing, like anything else, is a skill, and especially when you're not good at it, it will take you longer to write tests than someone who has experience. So as I've gotten further into the 3 years of my career, I've gotten better and faster at writing tests, and I've gotten better at knowing how long it will take me to write tests. But in that first year of my career, this was something I frequently underestimated. And finally, things just go wrong. If you're integrating with other systems within your organization and something breaks with a different system, you kind of, especially if you're like me and don't know many people within your organization, you've got to put out your feeler through the org chart. You've got to find the right person to speak to. You send them a message. They're like, cool, I'll book a time in your calendar. I'm busy today. We'll meet and discuss this at 2:30 on Thursday. Awesome. Suddenly your quick story that was just going to take 1 or 2 days is now blocked for several days while you find the right time to talk to this person. Then you're going to have a chat, and then they're going to book in another meeting with someone else and you to talk about it. And when things go wrong with integration between your system and other systems, they can be excruciatingly slow to resolve. And at a certain point, you do have to factor that into how much work, or at least the time frames in which your stories will be complete. And again, this is something I feel like I've gotten a lot better at, especially in the last year or 6 months. Looking at a story, having an intuition for what it interacts with, how things can go wrong, and what kind of timeframes it'll take for things to go wrong. But ultimately, things will go wrong in ways you don't expect, and stories will take longer, tasks will take longer than you kind of allocate yourself for them. It was hard for me starting out because I was a really confident coder. When I thought something would take X time and it took 2 times X time, or 5 times X time, or 10 times X time. In planning meetings, I would give a card a hilariously low time estimate. And my superiors would have to say, well, that's just not realistic. And even then, what they thought was a realistic estimate would sometimes get blown out by some unforeseen circumstance. I wish I could go back in time and tell myself to be prepared for things taking longer than I want them to, and to not feel bad when things take longer than I want them to. It's a natural part of working, especially in a big enterprise. There are lots of ways things can slow down. Writing tests will take time to get up to speed at, and in general, you will learn to make better estimates the more you estimate things. I feel like in this video I've said a lot of negative things, and I don't want that to define this 3 years of my experience. I've had a fantastic time. I've worked for fantastic organizations, I've worked with fantastic people, I've ultimately had a good time. But I do feel like it's important to call out things that have been challenging, or things that have kind of, thrown me off guard a bit. I think a lot of people talk about their experiences, especially in the LinkedIn world. They go from strength to strength to strength, or they try and spin every negative into a positive, but at the end of the day, some things in this 3 years have just been pretty crappy. I think one big shift in my mindset is that I now think about this more as a job. You know, I'm going to have good days, I'm going to have bad days. I'm going to have days where I'm extremely productive, I'm going to have days where I'm not at 100%. These are all normal things. There are going to be highs and lows, you know, as with anything in life, but especially with a job. You're going to have days where things are just miserable, and it will pass. And if you're working with good people who you enjoy working with, it will make it all tolerable and it'll make it all worthwhile. It's hard for me to say what the next 3 years will hold. I'm moving into a point in my career where things are going to be more stable. I'm hopefully going to stay in roles for longer. I'm going to build more mastery, rather than just trying to, you know, gather as much experience as I can. I've got a much better idea of what I want to do though, and that is write code. I can see myself going down the pathway of the back-end developer, you know, building up my expertise, especially maybe in Golang, and trying to move myself into a position where I'm a tech lead. It's hard for me to see myself moving too far up as a manager. I always want to write code, but I have accepted that, you know, the more responsibilities and the more seniority I take on, the less I will be writing code. It's also really exciting for me that I've got this YouTube channel now. I think I am quite a strong coder. I think I have a lot that I can share with the world about code, about programming, about how to put interesting things together. People have been enjoying my series about making a PlayStation 2 game. That's awesome. I'm keen to keep doing it, and I'm keen to keep talking about, you know, whatever I find interesting and just broadcasting that out to the world. Hopefully people can watch it and learn from it. I think this channel will continue to be a fun side project where I can share things that I'm a bit more, you know, directly passionate about in programming. Alright, and before I finish off, I would like to specifically call out the Australian Bureau of Statistics as being a fantastic place to start off a career. If you're in Australia, you're looking for an internship or a grad program, check them out. Cannot recommend them highly enough. I'm very, very glad that I started my career there. Awesome. So, thank you very much for tuning in. If there's anything that you would like to hear me talk about more, leave a comment. Maybe I'll respond to you in the comment. Maybe if there are common themes, I'll do a follow-up video talking about specific experiences in more depth. This was a very general, very broad discussion. But yeah, if there are people out there who are in similar positions in their career or who are later in their career, if people just want to, you know, leave some career stories in the comments, that'd be awesome too. I'd love to see some discussion. As I said, I've got a Discord server. Come say hi. Come chat. Come ask questions there if you want to have, again, some, you know, healthy career discussion. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Be sure to tune into this channel in the new year, as I'm going to do a lot of really cool and exciting things. I'm Tom, and I'll catch you next time.